After the Champions League final, Manchester City were not only crowned champions of Europe, but were the first English team to win a treble since 1999, and this is a team that deserves that honor. Pep Guardiola is the greatest manager in the world right now, and the team is full of world-class players. Erling Haaland is, objectively speaking, the best Premier League goalscorer of all time. Kevin De Bruyne has cemented himself as the best Premier League midfielder of his generation. Rodri has a case that he's the best defensive midfielder that Pep Guardiola has ever coached, and that's a bold statement, and Ruben Dias is on the path to be the next great Premier League center back. But despite all of that talent and all of those great players on the field, one player stood out in that final as somebody crucial to Manchester City's success: John Stones. This season, John Stones transitioned to playing a new position, something I'd call a false center back. Like a false nine, he would drop, or in this case step up into the midfield while Man City were on offense. This allowed Man City to be at their best during build-up while not sacrificing anything defensively. Now, we've seen center backs who are good on the ball before. He's called the Barnsley Beckenbauer for a reason, and David Luiz was very good on the ball a few years ago for Chelsea. But this is different. This is not a center back carrying the ball forward. Stones was straight up a midfielder at times, and this change was needed as Man City had Erling Haaland in the team this season. Haaland is an amazing goal scorer, probably the best in the world right now, but he doesn't contribute much during possession. And this change allowed Man City to keep their ball dominance that they had the previous season while not losing any defensive solidity. And this was not an easy position to play. João Cancelo, Rico Lewis, even Bernardo Silva were all tried out in a similar role and could not make it work. And those are just the players that Pep Guardiola allows to see during games. Who knows how many were tried out during training? And with how much Guardiola was experimenting with this position, you can see how crucial he viewed it. And when John Stones was able to come in and thrive in this role, it was arguably the turning point of Manchester City's season, allowing them to overtake Arsenal in the Premier League title race. And then, during the Champions League final, he continued his form, defending well, making smart passes, and his dribbling was superb. Stones was crucial to Manchester City's first ever Champions League title win. This all would have been hard to imagine 3 years ago when it seemed like Stones was on his way out from Man City. He had just been benched in the Champions League for an old, out-of-position Fernandinho and a 19-year-old Eric Garcia as City crashed out to Lyon. At the time, it seemed like the consensus was that Stones was just a flop, that City had spent all this money on a defender who didn't know how to defend. And from that perspective, it's crazy that Stones was able to become such a crucial part to Man City's season. But if you turn the clock back even further and you go back to when Stones was a young player, I'd argue that this was expected of John Stones, and this past season was John Stones fulfilling his potential. I'm Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I want to talk about the career journey of John Stones. Does anybody remember how Stones was linked to Barcelona in his Everton days? Keep in mind, this is 2015. Barcelona had just won a treble, had an amazing reputation, and it felt like we were still in the tiki-taka era. For them to be linked with a center back from England felt so far out of left field. I mean, this is no-nonsense Brexit ball England, and it was even worse at the time. I mean, no disrespect to Rio Ferdinand, who's an exception to this, but Barcelona signing a center-back from England felt like such an impossibility. I mean, the last center-back England sent to Spain was one of the worst signings ever. But these rumors had some weight to them. PK put out a world's best 11 that included John Stones. This is the year that Barcelona won a treble, which bears repeating, and Stone had finished outside the top half in his Premier League season with Everton. And this list was obviously extremely biased, but that kind of makes it crazier that Stones was included. And then, Pep Guardiola, the mastermind behind those Barcelona teams, takes a job in England, and the main defender he signs is that ball-playing center-back from Everton? You can understand the hype. But despite the hype, it was a disappointing first season for Stones and Man City, as City struggled to adapt to Pep's style of play. In the league, they finished third, but were never in a title race as Conte's Chelsea dominated the league. And in the Champions League, things were even worse. City lost 6-6 on aggregate to Monaco on away goals, and crashed out in the round of 16. And Stones was particularly disappointing as City conceded 6 goals. Now, in retrospect, we look at that Monaco team as Mbappe bursting onto the scene, Falcao turning back the clock, Bernardo Silva showing off his step to Pep, and even more great players in that squad. But that's all in hindsight. At the time, City had just lost to a French team that wasn't PSG, and Stones was a bit of a scapegoat. Next year, as City hit its stride under Pep, Stones found a more of a rotational role. This was in part due to injury, but Otamendi and company were just the preferred center-back partnership. Now, company was at the end of his career and he was dealing with a lot of injuries, so Stones still got to play a good amount of games and contributed to the 100-point season and Premier League title win. But when push came to shove in the Champions League knockout round, he was benched as City went out to Liverpool. Now, he did play well when he was on the field, and he turned that into a very strong World Cup campaign. But next season, injuries kept coming back and Laporte was signed, and Stones once again fell into a rotational role and was again on the bench as City went out of the Champions League to Tottenham this time. Couple that with a poor showing in the Nations League, and all the goodwill he had built up from the World Cup was gone. In the 1920 season, things stayed the same for Stones until the incident. After the restart, Stones only started 2 Premier League games, and they were both dead rubber games as Liverpool had already clinched the title. In the FA Cup, he was benched, and we're now at the point where in the Champions League, he was on the bench behind an out-of-position Fernandinho and Eric Garcia. Then, City signs Ruben Diaz and Nathan Ake in the summer. The writing seemed to be on the wall. But then something funny happened. Stones decided to stay and fight for his place at Man City, and he got some limited opportunities in the Champions League before injuries happened again. Only this time, it wasn't the Stones, but Laporte and Ake. And with both of them injured, Stones got his chance to start in the Premier League again. And he took that opportunity. Him and Ruben Diaz formed the best defense in the Premier League as Man City easily won the title. With a really good center-back alongside him, all of Stones' strengths started to show. His defending had gotten a lot better since he was a young player. As center-backs naturally mature later, he was now really good, and his on-ball ability, coupled with playing alongside a great ball-playing goalkeeper in Ederson, was instrumental to City controlling games. And then, on top of that, City finally made a really good Champions League run, as Stones and Diaz's partnership helped them advance to the Champions League final, where they really should have won if Pep Guardiola didn't overthink the game. Neither Fernandinho or Rodri really, but despite that loss in the final, it was still a great season for Stones, and he was rewarded by being named to the Premier League Team of the Season for the first time. Then in the summer of 2021, Stones had a great showing in Euro 2020. No, I did not misspeak. England made it all the way to the final before narrowly losing to Italy on penalties, where Stones was a very strong performer in that tournament. Then in the 2022 season, Stones again battled with injuries, but at this point he had proved his value and stayed in the Man City squad. And then this past season, as Man City needed a new system to accommodate Erling Haaland, Stones took center stage again and was a crucial part to Man City winning the treble. I want to take a step back. Stones was a crucial part of 2 Premier League winning teams, and then a squad player of another 3. And that's not to mention all of the cups that he won at Man City. And then he proved to be the missing piece of a treble-winning team. Now imagine everything you could have expected when you hear of an English centre-back that's linked with Barcelona, a prospect that Panenka Pirlo's team. To say that he'd be a crucial part of a Pep Guardiola team winning a treble while playing in this new hybrid center-back midfielder role, that sounds like I'm overhyping him. But Stones did it! He accomplished everything you could have thought him to do and more. That was a tough road, filled with setbacks, expectations, and injuries. But he did it. He fulfilled his potential and did everything you could have expected, and then some. I wanted to make this video because I was really excited about John Stones as he was developing as a player. The stuff that you were imagining that he could do, and then, things took a bit of a tough road for him. He had a lot of setbacks. But when you take a look back at his career, you realize he hit all of his expectations. And I feel like it's something good to do, because I'm somebody who's really interested in looking at the careers of prospects and trying to find that next star. And I feel like when somebody does this, when they fulfill all of their expectations, they should be celebrated. Because John Stones, he had a great season. He's proven to be a huge part of this Man City team. And honestly, you can make the case for a lot of these guys on Man City's team. I mean, Haaland being that guy who scored, 7 goals in 1 game at the U20 World Cup, proving to be the best goal scorer in the world? That's something to be celebrated. And I want to talk about players like Stones being able to do that. And yeah, that's all I got to talk about. See ya.